numbers.
Let's talk a little bit about inside the numbers because it's the time of year we're putting together the 2021 summer edition of Dave Campbell's Texas Football, which you can get mailed to you before it hits newsstands if you go to texasfootball.com/subscribe. And I think that we look at one thing we talk a lot about on this show is how in high school football you kind of have to measure success differently for different teams. In the NFL, I think that there is a very clear delineation of what a good season is and what a bad season is, right? I think if you make the playoffs, generally speaking, you had a good season. Is that fair?
Yes.
In the NFL?
I would agree
if you
with
make
that.
the playoffs, you had a good season. If you don't make the playoffs, there are different levels of bad season, but like if you don't make the playoffs, then it's a disappointment. You're in the bottom half of the league.
Right.
There's that side of things. College football is a little bit more nebulous, and we talked a little bit about this on Tuesday with my big dumb idea about realignment. But I think it's fair to say that like if you win your conference, if you make a bowl game, for the most part, it's hard to say it's a bad season.
Right.
But there's different levels. Like if Alabama goes to the Meineke Car Care Bowl,
Yeah.
I don't know if they have an SEC tie-in. If they go to that bowl, that will be a bad season for Alabama.
Absolutely.
So it's a little bit more nebulous when you take a step down. I would make the argument that it is even further nebulicized by when you drop down to high school football because you are dealing with different circumstances for different programs. It is not let's put it this way. It is not reasonable to expect a team from El Paso to win a state championship.
Right.
Okay? But if they can make it to, we talk all the time about teams from like the Rio Grande Valley. When they make it to the fourth round of the playoffs, that is a huge stinking deal.
Yeah.
That is
Look at Sherilyn Pioneer last year.
That's a legendary accomplishment.
Right.
Okay? As opposed to Duncanville rolls out of bed, and if they don't make the fourth round of the playoffs, it is a huge disappointment.
Absolutely.
So there are different levels and different levels of success that we talk about a lot on the show about how you measure success. There are some places, like I think like we've talked about teams that have made the playoffs forever, right? There's 25 teams, I think, that have made the playoffs 25 consecutive years, right? Making the playoffs is old hat. It's assumed, right? As opposed to there are a fair number of programs in the state where making the playoffs would be a monumental achievement and would be like undeniably a great season.
Right. Absolutely.
But let's set a measurement and let's just agree, and I don't know if you agree with this. If you win 10 games in a season,
yes,
that's a great season.
I agree. I think if you're
across the board. I think if you're Allen or you're Prairie Lee or you are El Paso Montwood or you are Beaumont United or you are Teague or you are Cleburne, if you win 10 games in a season, you did something impressive. That is a good year, hard stop.
Right.
There's some places where it's easier to win 10 games because of just realignment. For example, we've talked a lot about Lancaster. Lancaster is in a district with Dallas ISD. They are, in my opinion, a lot better than all of those teams.
Right.
That should be 7 or 8 wins right there.
Absolutely.
I don't know. I can't remember how big their district is. That should be 7 wins right there. Right. There are some places, and they should make the playoffs. They should win a playoff game. There's other places where winning 10 games is really gosh darn tough because you are grinding through.
You think about some of the other teams in District 11 and 6A where you're up against Duncanville, DeSoto, and Cedar Hill. Like when you get to the midway schools, or it's like that's difficult.
Absolutely. And so, what I wanted to do was I wanted to look at which teams have won 10 games in each of the last 5 seasons. Now, some of this is a little bit wonky because of course, 2020. 2020 ruins everything. But there are some teams that you would expect to be here that maybe you're like, well, what about that team? Like, why aren't they on there? One that springs to mind is Lake Travis. Lake Travis is not on this team. They have not won 10 games in 5 consecutive years because they went 6-1 this past year.
Right.
Any other year, would they have won 10 games? Like, we don't know, obviously, but they didn't play 10 games. They only played 7. Now, they got knocked out in the first round of the playoffs. So,
So that's considered a down year for them.
They did have control over that. But that is one thing that there is a little bit of a caveat here because of that. But in the end, there are a grand total of 26 Texas high school football teams that have that's a little stretched. That have we went widescreen. That have won 10 games in each of their last 5 seasons. Some of these I don't think you're going to be surprised about. Aledo has won 10 games in each of the last 5 seasons. If you are surprised by that, hello, welcome to Texas high school football.
Yeah.
They are the powerhouse,
this is what
right?
happens.
They have won it. Carthage has won 10 games in each of the last 5 years, right? Highland Park, right? Corpus Christi, Cal Allen, Mart. Some of these are not necessarily surprising.
No.
There are some here that I think people may not necessarily know about. One of them, and I routinely say I think they are one of the most criminally underrated programs in the state of Texas, and I think they have one of the most criminally underrated coaches in the state of Texas, is Munster. Munster, 11-2, 16-0, 12-2, 11-3, 10-4. I mean, consistently excellent what Brady Carney is able to do there at Munster. I think that people may be surprised to see a team like Union Hill. You're probably thinking, wait a second, Union Hill down in Gilmer? Like that 6-man program?
Right.
But yes, one of the most consistent 6-man programs in America. 12-2, 11-1, 11-2, 10-2, 11-1 every single year. Now, part of it, I would say, they are in a situation where out east, in my opinion, and especially in their district. Now, Leverett Chapel is on the rise, but generally speaking, I think they're in a district that is relatively manageable. They enter as the favorite in their district, but at the same time, you got to go out there and win the darn games.
Right.
And they've done it. That's one that surprised me putting together this thing. Another one that I think people may be surprised about is that there are a pair of private schools on here. Austin Regents, of course, is one of those. Austin Regents, you may remember, had a quarterback a couple of years ago whose name is escaping me at the moment, Wilson Long, who's now at TCU. But they have been one of the most consistent private school teams in the state of Texas. When you're talking about, they went 13-1, 13-1, 11-2, 11-2, and then last year they went 10-0. Now that you can see, based on COVID,
right?
They had to go perfect to win their state championship, and they were able to do that. Another one that I almost guarantee that people listening, unless they are fans of the program or they follow 6-man football in the private school ranks pretty closely, they may be surprised to see Bastrop Tribe Consolidated on there. You're probably thinking, Bastrop Tribe Consolidated, who are they? They play in TAIAO, which is an independent 6-man league, but they have been consistently excellent all throughout the course of their program. 10-3, 10-3, 11-1, 12-1, 11-1. One of the most consistent private school 6-man programs. Probably the 6-man program between them and then Stephenville Faith, who has been great over the past couple of years. Those are the 2 private school teams of record. So in a lot of ways, I think what this illustrates when you take a look at these is you've got a good mix of the heavy hitters, right?
Oh, yeah.
Aledo, Allen, Argyle, of course, Westlake, et cetera.
Carthage.
Mart, Gunner, right? Teams you expect. But I also think that what you're also seeing is a lot of teams that aren't on here, okay? You'll notice Galena Park North Shore. Not on this list because they went 9-4 in 2017. Yep. Right? Not on this list. I think that people may be surprised that a team like Denton Geyer is not on this list. Manville went 9-2.
Ryan.
Denton Ryan is on there.
I missed that.
Denton Ryan is on there. They've made it. But you may be surprised that some of these other big-time programs have not, because all it takes is one down year, and suddenly you're bringing that streak. Waco La Vega. Because they were in line to do it. In fact, they are probably the winningest team that's not on here, but they went 9-3 this past year.
Right.
And got knocked out by Argyle. So for me, I think this is if you're looking for a list, like if you're looking for shorthand of who are the most consistently excellent programs in Texas high school football right now, there are other ones that are obviously belong on this list, but here's a good place to start.
Right, and I think the other really good thing about having this as 5 seasons is you cannot sit there and say, oh, well, they've had
one class.
You know, like the freshman class was insane when they came in. The starting quarterback's there, and then they just rode that coattail, and then they'll lose every game next year, you know? So it's like the 5 really evens that out.
It's
for consistency.
It was interesting, and I found myself surprised putting this together of some of the teams that were on here, like Union Hill. probably wouldn't have. You could give me 100 guesses, and I wouldn't have thought about
No,
that. And then
I wouldn't have either.
some of these private school teams. In fact, like some of the private school teams, I thought are interesting that they're not on there. For example, teams that we hear a lot about, Dallas Parish Episcopal is always very, very good, or at least has been the past couple of years. But they've had a couple of down seasons in recent years.
All Saints.
All Saints. Things like that. But again, part of it is you've just got to that consistency is so difficult. And when we talk about winning, like for me, I know it's an adage I say a lot on the show, but I think winning the first state championship and having that first great year is the toughest one. Everyone else gets a little bit progressively easier because of the culture that you build, and these programs I think exemplify the culture that has been successful in Texas high school football. So there you go. We're gonna have a piece up on TexasFootball.com about this, but 26 teams have won 10 games in each of the last 5 seasons. So interesting little nugget here on May 20th on 5/20.
Don't forget it. Mark down the day.